That audit triggered the bank's fraud department. The bank called a meeting, and suddenly the door to my life opened wider than I'd thought possible. The bank sent an investigator to my house and to my brother's house. The investigator's badge made strangers polite in ways they had not been before. The bailiff came with papers. The first legal order to remove my brother as the caretaker was served at his kitchen table. He slammed the table and told them it was a witch hunt. He tried to burn the stack of paperwork. He did burn 3 pages before the bailiff stepped between him and the lighter. In court, the story was sharp and ugly. I read out loud emails and recordings and the notarized signature that had been forged. The judge looked at my brother like a man who had been caught off balance. He lied under oath and made it worse. The judge didn't yell. He read the law and said the obvious. Forging documents to steal property is a crime. The verdict was not immediate. My brother posted new things, started a GoFundMe under the guise of legal fees, and accused me of emotional blackmail. People who loved him still loved him, but the legal documents came down like a bell. The county invalidated the caretaker filing. The bank apologized in a letter that felt like spit in the face because it arrived late and formal and full of phrases. He was ordered to return the keys and vacate within 72 hours. He was also ordered to pay a fine and attend court-mandated fraud counseling. The worst part for him was the humiliation. The neighbors who had once nodded at him now avoided his eyes. My mother finally sat me down in the kitchen with her hands shaking and said she had been wrong to believe him. She said she had been afraid and she wanted to ask me for a real apology she had never earned. I told her I forgave her like you forgive a mistake that could have killed you. I forgave her mostly because I needed the middle ground not to be a canyon between us. The house felt like mine again, but different. Coming back into it was quiet and small. I changed the locks. I tossed the couch he had insisted on keeping and found a used one with a crack in the arm. I left Dad's chair where it had always been. I started keeping receipts in a different folder. I took down the website with all the condolence messages that still displayed like a shrine to a dead me. I told a neighbor to throw away the flowers that had sat in the hydrangea bed for weeks. The final confrontation was not dramatic in a courtroom or a viral video. It was in the parking lot of the county building where my brother handed me back the keys under the watchful eyes of 2 bailiffs. He said he was sorry, that he had been desperate, that he had been jealous of my independence. He promised to get help. He said he understood he had broken us. My stomach felt like it had been scraped. I took the keys like a judge handing down a sentence. I didn't yell. I didn't hug him. I handed back a box of Dad's old papers and drove away. Now, months later, the house is calm in a way that is new. I call the bank and have a person on the phone who knows my name. My brother lives with Mom but keeps his distance, which is better than anything he was promising when he pretended I was dead. I still have nightmares where strangers come to the door with flowers and newspapers. I keep the spare keys inside a locked box with a receipt taped to it. The truth is ugly but simple. He told everyone I died because he wanted my house. The bank, the notary, the neighbors' gossip, they all played their part. The keys the bank sent me were the accident that forced the rest of the world to look. Without that mistake, I don't know when I would have been able to prove I existed in the eyes of legal systems that prefer paperwork to people. I am here. I sleep in my daughter's room now. If a daughter is the place where you keep things you can't replace. I lock the doors at night and leave a light on in Dad's old study. I set boundaries that feel like a second legal document. The opposite of the opening image is true. Instead of being erased, I sit in the living room and read Dad's old letters. I feel the house is mine again. But I also feel its edges, where people like my brother can still try to cut in. I learned to call witnesses early, to make noise when people try to edit your life, and to keep the keys close. At one point, I thought maybe I could sneak past it. I changed my name slightly on social media, posted a photo of my feet at the beach with a caption that made it sound like I was traveling under a weird alias for a while. It was childish and desperate. It got 1 like. My brother reacted by posting a photo of Dad's urn in his living room and the caption that we would never forget. He texted my mother that I had chosen exile. Then the bank mailed me a package. This was the holy shit moment. A padded envelope with a return address from corporate showed up at my apartment. Inside was a certified letter and a heavy envelope stamped with bold letters, keys enclosed. The bank had sent my house keys to me by mistake. The letter said, as of the day the bank approved the transfer, they had mailed replacement keys to the property owner. I stared at the keys. They were not mine. They were brass with a sliver of paint, the kind of banal object that suddenly weighs like a verdict. For a breath, I felt vindicated. For a longer breath, I felt terrified because if I walked into my house carrying keys stamped by the bank, I would be showing the world I knew where I belonged. It would force my brother to confront me. It would force the good, blunt world to choose sides. I was desperate enough to try a false victory. I drove to the house at midnight, the keys heavy in my pocket like a weapon. The porch light clicked on like a camera flash. The door opened. The house smelled like someone else's detergent and Dad's old newspaper. My brother's shoes were lined up in the hallway. There were pictures of him on the mantel, and he had already rearranged Dad's chair to face the television he used to ignore. I stood in the doorway and felt two things break at once: the polite fiction of family and my own sense of home. I had the keys, but the house was already lived in by a man who had rewritten my story. He walked in from the back room with a paper on the table and didn't run. He was waiting like a predator who had never felt frightened. He said he had called the police, said he was the registered caretaker, said he had every right to remove me. His voice was calm in a way that made me nauseous. The police showed up because he had called them. They were polite. They asked for my ID and my proof of ownership. I handed them the mortgage records and the title. They listened. They took statements. They told me corporate would have to verify the keys. They told me I should take an emergency restraining request to the county courthouse. The law was a process that took time and paperwork. My brother used time like a weapon. At my lowest point, something akin to death washed over me. I realized truth is useless without witnesses. I had proof, but the bank and county offices had papers that looked official and a man's face that could convince a mother. My social circle thinned. Our mutual friends started avoiding my calls because family drama felt contagious. My mother, frightened and gaslit, called me from his living room and told me to be reasonable. That was the symbolic death. My identity as a daughter and a homeowner had been quietly canceled by everyone I loved. I cracked. I called Sarah in the middle of the night and cried like I had never cried before. I told her I was finished, that I didn't know how to show up in a world that had erased me. She said one sentence that landed like a map. We needed a witness who couldn't be silenced. She meant the public record and the press. She meant humiliation could work both ways. So I chose a new strategy. I started making noise. I documented everything. I recorded conversations with my brother, always starting with him admitting basic facts I could use later. I started streaming photos of the house to an online folder time-stamped and shared with the attorney Sarah found. I put a sign on the lawn that said, "This property is legally owned by me until court says otherwise." That sign was petty and dangerous and exactly the visible thing that forced the county officials to stop pretending this was a private matter. The pressure tightened. My brother retaliated by showing up at my job and calling my coworkers a liar. He posted doctored letters. He invited the neighbors to a remembrance coffee where he played the victim. People who had once stopped to swap stories about Dad now crossed the street when they saw me. For a week, it felt like everyone was testing which side they would bet on. Then the county clerk made a mistake. While reviewing quiet files, a clerk noticed the signatures on the bank form didn't match their system. She pulled the physical notarized signature from their archive and called the notary. The notary said she had not signed anything. An internal audit began. My brother had forged a notary's signature in a rush to file the abandonment form. The first thing that happened was a Facebook post. My brother posted that I had died. He clicked publish, added a black ribbon emoji, and pretended to cry in the photo where he had his arm around my old cat carrier. Within an hour, my inbox was full of condolence messages I didn't deserve to read. Within 2 hours, the funeral home was calling. Within a day, my mother moved in with him. I was not dead. I was in my apartment, asleep with my stupid phone on the couch. I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing so hard, it smacked into the cushions. I peeled myself into daylight and saw the first lie waiting. My brother had told everyone I was gone to make it look like the house was abandoned. That was the main point. He wanted my house. He wanted the small 2-bedroom I'd inherited from Dad. He wanted the keys, the equity, the parking space. He wanted it so bad he invented my death and broadcast it to survive scrutiny. He knew the law, and he knew people would step in when they thought a property was orphaned. He also knew Mom would be easy to shepherd. I called him. He answered like everything was normal and told me my phone must be broken because the post was about a different person. I told him the truth. He started with anger that didn't fit a brother who'd posted an obituary. Anger at me for being alive, at me for being late on the mortgage once, at me for not calling earlier. He said he had already filed paperwork claiming I had abandoned the property. He said the bank was moving fast. He said the house would be his before I read another paragraph. This is the first crack. Family loyalty turned to property logistics, and it moved faster than my denial. I did what anyone would do. I ran to the bank. At the branch I had been with since I was 19, the teller looked at me with that mixture of boredom and power that small-town bankers get. She said she couldn't find anything in my name. She said my account had been flagged as closed. She said there was a notation from a regional office that my estate had been processed. She handed me a paper stamped with photocopied signatures and dates. The signatures were forged. The dates matched the day after my brother posted the fake obituary. Someone, somewhere had pretended I was dead, and the bank had accepted it. The woman behind the counter said she needed proof of life, and that would take time. When I told her I was literally standing there in the lobby alive, she told me they couldn't do anything until corporate verified identity. She suggested I go home and gather ID. I called my friend Sarah. She's the one who taught me how to read tax forms and how to keep the receipts that make grown-ups feel sane. She came to the bank, she held my shoulders in the parking lot, and said we needed a lawyer. Half an hour later, she was filing a complaint and reading every scrap of the bank's terms out loud like a curse. Her voice was a steady thing in the middle of an insane day. We did the obvious, filed fraud reports, got my ID notarized, went to the county office, and demanded the chain of title. The title showed the house still in my name. The mortgage payments were current. But there was a stranger stamped in the county file as the care of agent for my estate. The name was my brother, with a phone number that traced back to his burner. At that point, it should have felt impossible. It felt small and terrible instead. My mother called crying because the neighbors had come to her with flowers and sympathy, and she was too old to stand up to our son. She had been convinced by him that taking me out of the picture would spare her a fight over Dad's ashes. She said she didn't know what to do, that she had signed something she thought was just a form for the funeral home. That was when everything began to encrypt. My brother piled lie upon lie like a bam deck of cards. He told Mom he had a right to handle Dad's estate because he was the only child who stayed in town. He told the neighbors I was long gone to a city job I had never had. He told the bank I had dementia. He told the funeral home he had the right to cremate Dad and had already done so to speed closure. He told my mother that he had the family's best interest in mind. The chaos accelerated in public. The neighbor who used to borrow sugar from my porch began telling strangers I had been in an accident. Someone left condolence flowers on my doorstep and a note that said, "Your family will be missed." A realtor called asking if the house was on the market and told me not to worry, it hadn't been scheduled yet. The most dangerous thing about this was how normal everyone acted. People adjusted to the idea of me not existing like flipping a channel.